Okay, good morning. This is Richard Shu, host of Shu Untied. And this morning, I'm really thrilled and honored to have with me as my guest Annie Duke, who's a former professional poker player, best-selling author, now a venture capitalist. Annie, welcome to the program.
Thank you for having me.
So, Annie, I have to start by asking you, like so many other people who watch you play poker, how did you choose to go into poker to begin with? Was that a childhood thing? Tell me about that.
Uh, Okay. So it depends on like the actual decision. So I'll give you a sort of like roll it up, I guess. All right. So when I was young, we played a lot of cards for fun in our family, but not really poker.
Uh-huh.
But lots of games like gin and um a game called Oh Hell, which is sort of a mini version of bridge. Um, Used to play bridge, hearts. So lots and lots of card games happening in our house, but again, not poker. So I think maybe I had a little bit of card sense.
Uh-huh.
Then my brother, when I was in college, became a professional poker player.
Mm.
So I would actually, so I went to college in New York. He was playing professional poker in New York, so I would actually go and watch him play.
Mm.
Um, so I kind of got a sense a little bit of the game there. He was very good. I got to watch some great players. Uh, Back in the day, they were all very young at this point, but like Eric Seidel, who's many times over world champion, um, Dan Harrington, who also main event world champion, my brother, who is really good, Jason Lester, who's made the final table of the World Series of Poker. It was like there was just at that time in New York, there was just this group of people who were sort of learning from each other and really intellectual about the game, and they all became amazing players. And I got to sort of be in the mix there. But again, I was in college, I wasn't playing myself.
Mm-hmm.
Then when I was in graduate school and living on a stipend, and I couldn't really afford anything super fun, my brother started flying me out to Las Vegas during the World Series of Poker,
Mm-hmm.
um, and putting me up at the Golden Nugget in
Mm-hmm.
beautiful downtown Las Vegas. And it turned out that I didn't really like Las Vegas very much. I don't really enjoy gambling. Gambling being doing things where the edge is against you, where you have a
Mm-hmm.
negative expectancy. So it was a little bit boring for me. And so he actually suggested that maybe I should go try playing some small limit games because I'd watched him so much.
Mm-hmm.
So then, like once a year during graduate school, I would go out and play some poker. My brother would give me like $300 or something and be like, here's your budget. And I'd be playing very small stakes. And then he kind of let me keep what I earned, because I was a very starving graduate student. So that was kind of like the lead up in terms of like what was my familiarity with poker. Now, none of that was like, and I'm going to do that as a career. What ended up causing me to do it as a career was actually something that I write about in Quit, which is a forced quitting event.
Hmm.
So, I point out like sometimes you quit voluntarily, and then sometimes you're forced to quit.
Mm-hmm.
So we can think about like a career-ending injury.
Mm-hmm.
In sports, you're forced to quit. You just can't keep going anymore. You're just out. If you're fired, that's sort of forced quitting. You have to stop your job because someone else decided for you. And in my case, at the end of graduate school, I already had my job talks lined up, and I was going to go become a professor. A lot of tenure track, all tenure track positions, and I got really sick. And so I ended up in the hospital for a couple of weeks, had to cancel my job talks, needed to take time off to recuperate. So I was forced to take time off in order to take care of what was going on with me. And during that time that I took off, I needed money because I wasn't in school now. I didn't have, I mean, even though the stipend was modest, it was still money.
Mm-hmm.
And my brother was the one who actually suggested that maybe I try playing some poker in the meantime,
Hmm.
to try to just kind of make ends meet. So that's what I did, and I started making money right away.
Hmm.
Um, really fell in love with the game, really loved it,
Hmm.
and ended up continuing to do that for 18 years as a
Oh,
professional
wow.
player.
That's
So
a long time.
it was really because I got sick, because I don't think there'd be any reason that I would have explored uh,
Yeah.
another option between path that I was on if that hadn't been forced upon me.
Now, did you like it right being a professional poker player? Did you like that right at the beginning, or did it take a little while to kind of grow on you?
So, I mean, it depends on what you mean by like, because I don't think that there was any point at which I universally liked poker. But I don't think that's necessarily unusual for I mean, I don't think anybody universally likes every single thing about their job, but I think that there were some particular challenges that were hard for me. So the things I liked right away was the game, like the game, the strategy, the tactics, trying to figure out for each player what's the best way for me to approach that player and maximize my ability to win against the way that they're in particular winning, trying to figure out as best as I could, narrow down like what they were holding, what their patterns were, get a sense of sort of how to model everybody at the table so that I could figure out how to play against them. And also just then like learning the game, learning the odds, like how do you actually figure out mathematically where you stand in a game where you can't see your opponent's cards. Like that stuff I loved. Loved it from the minute that I played, still love that part of the game. The thing that I didn't love so much was the culture. And it was interesting because I was sick, the sort of flexibility was really good for me. The sort of, sort of hiding in a corner almost at a poker table was really good for me because I didn't really feel that well. So that was good. But the bad thing about it was that there were no women really playing. So, throughout my career, only about 3 to 5% of women who are professionals, about 3 to 5% are women. And so I was really the only woman usually at the table, unless the dealer happened to be female. And, poker's weird. Like the things that are kind of good about it, like not having an HR department or a set schedule that I actually kind of liked, are also really bad about it. Not having an HR department when you're the only woman sitting at a table in a situation where the game is designed to create stress. It's a very weird thing about poker that it's not fun if people aren't risking something that actually matters to them. And so that can be very stressful when people lose, they're not at their best.
Yeah, right.
And when you're the only woman at the table, that not at their best is very often going to be directed toward you, either in ways that just have to do with like sort of emotional aggressiveness or some real sexualizing of me. And that stuff I did not enjoy and never enjoyed. And it's part of what a little bit sort of wore me down in the game. But I loved the game enough that I was, sort of willing to accept that situation for what it was, because I wanted to be great, I mean, so it was like, all right.
What if you had to say what was your strongest, the characteristic that gave you the biggest edge? Because obviously you were a very successful poker player. What would you say that was that gave you that you were better than almost everybody at, or your strongest skill?
Well, I don't think I was better than almost everybody at anything, but I think that the way that I used to describe it was that, so everybody, depending on the day, might have an A game, a B game, a C game, a D game, maybe even an F game for them. And the question is like, what's the range between those things? And how you could not be playing your A game might be like, you might just be tired or sick, but mostly it's because you've gone on something called tilt. So tilt is a term that's taken from pinball. I don't know if you've played any pinball, but if you shake the machine too much, it will stop working. So if you shake your brain too much, it will also stop working in any kind of rational way. And in poker, when you're losing, particularly if you lose a hand that you were a huge mathematical favorite on. So let's say that I'm in a situation where we put all our money in the pot and I'm going to win that hand like 82% of the time. I mean, a good player knows what the odds are. And boy, when that 18% hits, it just, it's hard to say, well, I'm going to observe it 18% of the time. So this is just one of those, which of course, rationally we would do. No, your amygdala like lights up like a neon sign. And everything feels very unfair. And it's just emotionally very hard. And so you might be able to maybe flush one of those away, but if you have a few, which you will, obviously, like you can have a few of those in a row, because that's just 18% times 18% times, it's going to happen.
Yeah.
That people can really kind of go off the deep end. And what you would see is the thing that I would say is that there were so many people in poker who were so much more talented than me, who, if you put their A game against my A game, I would have no chance, like literally, except that I was playing somewhere in the B+ to A range for what I was capable of almost all the time. And they would really swing. So they would allow those, what we call bad beats, where you lose as a mathematical favorite. They would let them really get to them. And they would start playing some really, really bad poker as a result. So I think that the thing that I was actually really good at is that my range was compressed between like how I was playing on my worst day versus how I was playing on my best day. And so then I could tolerate the fact that on other people's best day, they were actually better than me, because I had enough of the time at the table where I was playing better than they were, because they were emotionally unwell.
Is that because are you like better ability to like disconnect from your emotions or not let your emotions get to you mentally? I mean, is there something about you maybe that I know sometimes hedge fund managers often talk about this, like their emotions are not connected, which is why they can make, rational decisions, even emotionally. It's very, very hard.
So like if you talk to my husband, he would tell you that I'm very resilient. So I think I bounce back from it pretty quickly. I'm good at compartmentalizing. And like, if you want to just get like, we can get really deep. I think the origin of that is that I grew up in a family where my mother was very, very, like a very serious alcoholic. Like not like, oh, she drinks too much, a little bit of an alcoholic, like, like starting to drink in the afternoon every day and, not able to get up until noon and that kind of thing. So really not good. And so what was happening in my household was very unpredictable. What mood was she going to be in? You didn't know. You could do something. It was very like everything was very capricious. Like you could do something that you would think would get praise. Like, oh, mom hasn't cleaned the bathrooms or something in a while, because, she was very dysfunctional. And then you would go clean the bathrooms and you would think she's gonna be like, oh, thank you, like you cleaned that. But then she would get angry, because I think it was kind of like a statement about her, that her child had done this. I mean, I'm guessing, but and so it was all sort of very unpredictable. And so I think honestly, there's different ways that children can react to that, but one of them is you've just got to flush it, because it's like it's very hard to survive in an environment like that where someone is I would say, emotionally incredibly unpredictable, could be very angry one minute and then like wanting to sit down and laugh and play a game with you the next. And it was hard. So I think that I think that I just naturally am probably resilient, and then really develop that skill to just be like, okay, that doesn't have anything to do with me. Like, let me move on to the next thing, because I got to be okay and I have to live my life. So, I mean, probably more than you were asking for, but I think a lot of it is like, first of all, origin story. And then second of all, like, how was I naturally born in terms of my temperament? And then when you bring those two things together, I'm like, all right, move on to the next hand. Let's go.
Yeah. No, that makes sense. Well, tell me, so you played professional poker for 18 years. Did you ever think you were going to play that long when you started? I mean, or did it just kind of 1 year, tell me a little bit about that.
Well, certainly not right in the beginning. I mean, I think I really thought I was doing it like in the meantime until I got back to my doctorate. But I was good at it. And, when you're good at something, it's pretty hard to walk away from it. So I had a lot of success very early. The first time I played in the World Series of Poker, I made like 3 different final tables, or I think I cashed in one event and made 2 final tables. And then I actually cashed in the main event. So it was 4 things. And I remember I came away from that with $70,000, which, I was a graduate student. My stipend was $13,000 a year.
Yeah, right.
And it was just like, just seemed like so much money at the time. And it's not, I don't tend to do things for money, but it was just like a mark of success, that this was something I was really good at. and I was getting a lot of reinforcement. And the other thing that was kind of funny is that I actually got a lot of kind of sort of validation and self-worth out of sort of the toughness that it took to be in that environment, particularly as a woman.
Yeah.
And so I think that there were a lot of things that I was getting out of it. It's interesting because as now being older, I will tell you that I do spend quite a bit of time looking back on that version of myself and kind of mourning that person. Because, you know, it's funny because I've actually said, like, I wish that somebody could have guided me into trading, because I feel like I would have gotten the same thing out of it, like the same joy that I was experiencing at poker, without some of the heartache, you know, without some of the, oh, I wish that, you know, for my younger self, I wish that she wasn't sitting at a table with people propositioning her all the time, or calling her, you know, over and over again, a word that starts with C, you know, because she won a hand, where there would have been some guardrails around that, but I still would have been able to be exercising the same part of my mind and the creativity that I think that I could bring to the table, the emotional control, that kind of stuff. So I'm happy for that person in terms of what they were able to accomplish and how they were thinking about the game, but I'm sad in terms of how they were treated on a daily basis. And I kind of, you know, some part of me says, oh, I kind of a little bit wish that I would have walked away from it in retrospect.
Yeah, interesting.
But that's me as an older person. I think a little bit thinking about, like, what would I want for my daughters? You know?
Yeah. So when you walked away from the game, how did you decide what to do next? I mean, you know, you've been playing poker as a professional. I mean, that must've been a really big decision. I mean, that's all you've been doing, and, you know, like, how do you go from, how do you go from there?
So this is actually a really good, this has been a lesson for me, is that I think a little bit after what had happened with graduate school and getting sick, I have always sort of taken the approach of things in parallel. So I'm a big person who's like, I understand what the value of an option is, and keeping an option open while you're exploring other things so that you can start to understand, is that thing for me or not? So I started giving talks. So I started playing poker in 1994 is when I started playing. And then in 2002, I got asked by a hedge fund, actually called the Parallax Fund, which was the hedge fund back then. Roger Lowe was the head of it. I got asked to come give a talk to their traders, and they wanted me to talk about how playing poker might inform the way that you think about risk. And, you know, that was a moment where I started bringing my background in cognitive science together with poker, and actually thinking about the way that both could inform each other in terms of decision making. And I didn't talk so much about risk in particular. I talked about sort of how your risk attitudes can change depending on the flow of what's been happening and recently in terms of winning or losing. And I loved it. It was a great talk. I remember I was 2 weeks away from my due date with my 4th child. So I had to give the talk without shoes on because I couldn't fit anything on my feet. But it was great. And Roger ended up actually recommending me to some other people. And slowly but surely, I just started developing this speaking business where I would go and give talks, mostly in finance. And then eventually I started getting recommended out to even just like marketing teams or really anything, because obviously decision making kind of crosses any kind of function you could imagine. And yeah, so then I was doing that. Eventually that actually became more of my time than poker. So this was happening in the last 10 years of my career where I was doing that. And then I had this book that I really wanted to write. I didn't know it at the time, but it was called Thinking in Bets. And what it was really just an expression in a book form of the things I had been talking about. Like, how can we think about the intersection of cognitive science and poker as it speaks to decision making under uncertainty? And I've been, giving talks on that for 10 years at that point. And I really wanted to put it down on paper, and wasn't finding the time for that. So that's a thing that people don't know about me, is it wasn't an abrupt switch for me. It was like, okay, I'm already giving talks in this space. I'd already done some consulting in that space. And so I had something very clear to walk toward that was actually, I was spending kind of more of my time on and was getting me more energized. So I'm a big, like, in parallel, like even now, I write books, I still give talks, I have consulting clients, I teach. And I kind of keep all those streams going at the same time, because I really hate to close out an option. I just, and that's sort of the poker player in me speaking, like option value is really important to me.
Now, you've written a couple of books now, is that right?
So I've written, I've written like 8 books or something, but 3 general audience books.
Okay.
So Thinking in Bets was the first one. So that's the one that I really wanted to write. And I published that in 2018. Then I followed it in 2020 with How to Decide. And then the most recent one is Quit, The Power of Knowing When to Walk Away. So that one came out in October of 2022. And I'm already nosing around the next one, which I'm very excited about, which I think Gary Marcus and I are going to write together. Gary Marcus is a cognitive scientist, has really been quite outspoken about where AI is. He's a skeptic. He is not as bullish as other people are on it. And I think he offers a really nice counterpoint to a lot of the, oh, it's amazing, and or, oh, the world is over. I think he's very reasonable on that. So I think we're probably we've got a book in mind that we want to really write together. I've actually known him. We've known each other since we were in graduate school. So that will be like super fun. Yeah. So 3 general audience books, got a 4th one on the mind.
And what do you do for first round capital? I mean, are you a venture capitalist there? What do you do there?
So let me just say, I don't source deals for them. So I started working with them, let me think, it's about 4 years now. And Josh Koppelman brought me in. I was actually working only with him initially on thinking about the decision-making processes at First Round. And we worked together for a few months, which resulted in a very big data project, kind of just looking at funnel value. That was cool. And then we started, from that, he really wanted to understand, like, how can we really change and clean up the decision processes for partner meeting, the way that they think about investments, the way they think about follow-ons. And so he then introduced me wider to the rest of the partnership, and I've been working with them ever since. So if you look at their decision process, when I came in, it literally basically doesn't resemble what their decision process is now. And the decision process now is meant not just to increase accuracy of the decisions as they make them, but also creates an incredible data store of understanding what the judgments of the different partners are at the time of the decision, doing some forecasting where we can start to close those loops to really understand how can we improve the decision making, and what are the most important features of a company or a founder or a team, of the market that people are in. So it's a very data-driven approach, as well as really incorporating a lot of the work that people like Daniel Kahneman have done on really understanding what good decision hygiene looks like. How do you make sure that if you have a partnership of 6 people, that you're preserving the independence of their opinions and not cross-pollinating, cross-influencing, coercing opinions, and that you're actually getting a view of where there's dispersion of the opinions in order to really improve decision quality. So it's been super fun. It's been a great project. We're at the point now where we have enough vote history that we're starting to really do really cool data analytics on the voting, and it's been very rewarding. And let me just say also, just for the record, that they're just really good people over there. They really are. I absolutely love working with each and every single one of them. They're just really A plus humans, which are the kind of people that I like to work with.
Yeah, interesting. So let me ask you, Annie, it's so interesting. I mean, I love hearing about all the things you're doing now. Do you think you'd be able to do the level that you're doing it if you hadn't played poker for the 18 years? And you talked about, hey, I wish I'd just done it for 5 or maybe a lot less. But do you think you would be able to do all the things you're doing now without having played so much? What do you think?
So I think yes and no is the answer. So if I just stuck with cognitive science, I certainly would have I would have had the frameworks and the understanding of just like really good experimental design, which you need in order to really understand data. I certainly would have had that background. I mean, that's a lot of what I'm pulling in when I'm working on, for example, what does a good decision process look like? The real understanding, though, of decision making under uncertainty, I think, comes from being a practitioner, right? So you can study that all you want, but until you're actually in the middle of a hand having to make a decision for a ton of money, and when you can't see your opponent's cards and you have to rep that over and over again, I think that does give you a very different look and a very different perspective, which I think has been incredibly helpful for me to be able to understand what are the challenges that my clients face. And then, of course, there's just, look, if I weren't a professional poker player at the level that I played, would someone have wanted to publish my book?
Right.
Probably not. Would Josh Koppelman or I also work with Renegade Capital, Rosanna Renata, would they have reached out to me and wanted to work with me or any of my other clients? Probably not. I mean, obviously, when you succeeded in something like poker for, and done it for as long as I did,
totally.
I think that it gives you sort of the stamp of approval,
totally.
This is sense. Someone,
yeah.
So would the publisher have accepted my book otherwise? I'm guessing no. Would it have done as well as it did? I'm guessing no.
Yeah.
Because I'm very lucky to have this story, right? Of, I was a practitioner in this very particular, very high risk, high uncertainty environment. And I also have a background in actually studying the topics that I was bringing to bear in poker. So yeah, of course not. So when I say I'm a little bit sad for that person, I often follow it with, I wonder if she wouldn't have been happier having a more anonymous life, for example, right? So I'm including in there that I probably would have just been a tenure track professor. Now, maybe I would have ended up like, an Angela Duckworth and written an amazing book and a big hit, or a Katie Milkman who wrote How to Change and gotten to that level. But, that would have been also somewhat a matter of luck as well. So I don't know where that would have ended up, but I think it's made my life very easy in a lot of ways, at least my post-poker life.
Totally. Now, let me ask you, when your brother asked you to play poker, I said, hey, Annie, you should play some poker to make some money when you were sick and all that. Did he ever dream you were going to be as successful as you ended up being?
Well, what he says, what he describes, he's actually described this before, is in the beginning, when I very first started playing, and he was like, oh, you should try playing poker in the meantime, since you can't make any money at graduate school right now. That I would ask him questions about hands, and he'd be like, doing a crossword puzzle or sort of watching TV while he was answering my questions. And then he describes it as a few months in, I asked him a question and he had to put that down to answer the question.
Yeah.
And, what he always said was that he always believed in me more than I believed in myself. So the minute he had to put that paper down, in order to, because it was an interesting question that I had asked him, that was the moment where he said she could actually really be really good at this. So he was always pushing me to do more, and he had a greater belief in me than I did, for sure.
Now, do you play any poker at all now, even recreationally with friends? No, not at all?
No.
Oh,
no, I don't really find it. I mean, I've played with friends some, just like in a basement home game for very low stakes, playing silly games like, Dealer's Choice, and people can call guts or
Yeah,
something.
yeah.
But if I'm going to hang out with friends, I don't actually want to be doing it over a poker table because, you know, like the level at which I find it really enjoyable to think about the game is really different than the level that you would want to be thinking about it. This is casting no aspersions on the people that I'm playing with. It's that you have to shift into a different mindset.
Makes sense.
Where you're really treating it like a social event. And if I'm doing that, I'd rather do a social event, right? Like, because it's hard to shut your mind off. It's hard to sort of shut off the way that you kind of think about the world when that's all that you knew for a really long time.
Yeah.
So we haven't done that in quite a while. We did it maybe before the pandemic. We did it maybe 3 times. And since then we just haven't schedule it because I'd rather just go to dinner with you.
Yeah, totally get it. Well, Annie, I really appreciate you taking the time. I loved hearing your story about how you made poker part of your super successful career. When you write your next book, I'd love it if you could come back and tell me about it.
Oh, I would love to. Maybe I'll bring Gary Marcus along with me.
Oh, I'd love to have him. Yeah.
Yeah.
This is Richard Hsu and Annie Duke. Thanks.